When Hades 2 first hit early access in May 2024, I bought it immediately. Not because I thought I'd grind it nonstop, but because I knew I'd fall into it eventually. I'd play it for a few days, disappear, then come back a few months later, and the game would feel bigger, more content, more adjustments, more stuff that made me think, okay, one more run. And I kept doing that through early access with the full 1.0 release on September 25th, 2025. But here's the thing, while I was coming back for the combat, I was not coming back for the story. I've always loved mythology, I grew up obsessed with it. So you'd think Hades 2 would have been an instant story lock for me. It wasn't. At first the story felt like background to the real addiction. Builds, weapon, movement, the rhythm of a run. But I knew the headline. You're Melanoid trained by Hecate going after Kronos, the Titan of Time. But beyond that, I wasn't fully plugged in. I would skim dialogue, skip through conversations, treat the writing like seasoning instead of the meal. And then Hades 2 did something I still don't see many games manage to pull it off. Because the moment the surface became real, everything changed. If you haven't reached that part, I'm going to keep this spoiler light, but I do need to talk about what the surface is and why it matters. The first time you step onto the surface, it feels like the game is opening a second world inside of itself, not a bonus area, not a side route, a full second access to the entire roguelike loop. And then you just start dying, not because you lost a fight, not because you got greedy, not because you messed up your build. You start dying because the game tells you you don't belong here. There's a curse on the surface called Chthonic Fate. Now, I did forget the name, I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know how to say it right. I probably butchered it. Chthonic Fate, but that shit drains your life while you're up there. It's this slow, humiliating countdown that doesn't care about how good you got the mechanics down. You can be playing clean, you can be winning, and you're still running out of time. To make you love me. Shout out to Tyler the Creator. That was the first time Hades 2 made me stop treating it like a runs only game. Because suddenly, I had real questions. Why can't I survive here? What is this place really? What is the point of giving me a whole new route if I'm not even allowed to exist in it? So I had to talk to Moros, and I had to engage and do some stuff in the crossroads and do this incantation. And the incantation called Unraveling a Fateful Bond, which removes the curse and lets you properly survive on the surface. And when I finally understood that, and when I looked up this game and I was seeing everyone's reaction and I was talking to Moros, it was at that point where I just turned off my second monitor and everything clicked. Hades 2 wasn't asking me to pay attention to the story. It was designing the story as a progression system. Once you realize the narrative is integrated into the gameplay loop this tightly, ignoring it starts to feel like you're playing with the game one eye closed. And the deeper you go, the more Hades 2 proves it's not just bigger than Hades 1, it's structurally ambitious. It has dual progression paths. The underworld route and the surface route aren't just separated maps. They're two different ways of experiencing the game's tension, pacing, and progression. It makes the first game feel like a blueprint. Like Hades 1 was the test that proved the formula works, and Hades 2 is the version that asks what happens when you stretch that formula without breaking it. And it doesn't stop at routes. It pushes replayability in the places that matter most for a roguelike. Because if you want to talk about what makes a good roguelike stand out, it always comes back to the same foundation. Synergies that can turn into an average run into something ridiculous. Weapon variety, meta progression that gives you long-term momentum without killing the challenge, and enough flexibility that you can keep discovering new, I didn't know that was possible moments hundreds of runs in. Hades 2 has 6 nocturnal arms, and the key detail is that each weapon isn't just a different moveset. Each one feels like a different philosophy of combat. Each weapon has multiple aspects, 4 per weapon, so even when you think you've learned the weapon, the game basically asks you to learn again in a different language. Hades 2 having 6 nocturnal arms, and 3 different aspects for each of those nocturnal arms, That alone massively increases replayability because 6 weapons isn't just 6 playstyles anymore. It's 6 weapons multiplied by aspects, multiplied by boons, multiplied by how you personally prefer to build. If you're not used to this style of combat, the game can feel brutal at times. The pacing is faster, movement is more demanding, and your mistakes compound quickly. But what keeps it fair is the meta progression. You've got tools that let you shape runs before they start, keepsakes or arcana, and upgrades that tilt probability in your favor. And the kind of long-term progression that doesn't remove difficulty, it gives you leverage. And I love that because it's what roguelikes are supposed to be, not get stronger until the game can't stop you, but get smarter until you can. That's why eventually you start developing a relationship with the game's nonsense, because yes, Hades 2 can absolutely bullshit you. And then you learn how to bullshit it back. You stop thinking of boons as damage upgrades and start thinking of them as run-defining mechanics. For me, one of the clearest examples that is Poseidon's Sea Star. Sea Star gives you a chance to duplicate certain rewards when you claim them. And that sounds simple until you realize what that means in a roguelite where one extra upgrade can completely change the trajectory of a run. It's not just more stuff, it's more momentum. It's the difference between barely surviving and suddenly feeling like the game can't keep up with what you're building. And this is where Hades 2 becomes dangerously addictive, because it constantly rewards you for understanding its systems deeper than the surface level. But the part that really separates it, at least for me, is how much narrative weight it carries without ever slowing down into a traditional story. I've done over 100 runs, and what's wild is that they didn't just feel completely different mechanically, they felt different narratively, because the world reacts. There was one time where I got stuck on a fight with Eris. She was a complete wall for me. The characters reacted to it every time I died and talked about something new about that fact. They're out there processing it with you, like the world is actually tracking your struggle instead of pretending every run exists in a vacuum. And when you finally push further, when you're reaching major points like surviving the surface properly, reaching Olympus' roots, or making progress against Kronos, the game doesn't treat it like a checkbox, it treats it like an event. You come back to the crossroads and it feels like people have been wanting to hear what happened, waiting to hear what happened. That's not common in video games. A lot of games have reactive dialogue, but most of it is shallow, a line or two and then back to normal. Hades 2 feels like an ongoing conversation, and each dialogue I'm just like, there's more, there's more, there's more, there's more. We just talked about that 2 runs ago, and now we're talking about something completely different. Even characters who aren't aligned with you in a clean, heroic way have perspective. Nemesis, for example, isn't just a supportive ally, she's rivalry. Nemesis even asks in this narrative that she says, "We might deserve this," or "Do you think we deserve this?" as a question. Nemesis thinks the gods might deserve what's coming to them, but Melanoid disagrees. And that matters because it keeps the story from being simple. It keeps it human. Melanoid isn't just a weapon pointed at Kronos, she's a person inside a war, surrounded by people with their own motives, doubts, and pride. So eventually I hit a moment I didn't expect. I stopped putting background noise on. I stopped treating runs like something I could half watch while listening to something else, because I realized the story wasn't separate from the gameplay anymore. The gameplay was the story. Every failure forced me back into dialogue. Every breakthrough created a new conversation. Every new route opened more context. It's the closest I've seen a game come to making narrative progression feel like a mechanic instead of a reward, and that's why. By the time I was truly locked in, Hades 2 wasn't just a sequel. It was Supergiant taking everything they already did well, style, music, atmosphere, character writing, and applying it to a roguelike loop that's bigger, deeper, and more structurally ambitious than the first game ever had to be. I've been with Supergiant long enough to respect their identity. Transistor was one of those games that makes it obvious they cared about tone the same way they cared about mechanics. And watching that studio go from that era to Hades 2, it feels like watching a team refine a language they already speak fluently. They've gone down the roguelike mechanics, they've gotten the storyline just amazing, so I can't imagine if Supergiant thinks this game, Hades 2, is a 7 out of 10 for them, then what does a 10 out of 10 game look like to them? And I cannot wait for Supergiantgames' future game. It's most likely not a Hades 3 because they don't usually do sequels, from what I hear, and Hades 2 was just a miracle that it was, but yeah. Basically, they're excellent devs. And Hades 2 is my game of the year because it made me care in a way I didn't plan to. I came in thinking I just build broken runs and move on, and instead the game slowly cornered me into paying attention until I realized I wanted to. So if you've played this, I want to know this. What's the build that made you feel like the game couldn't stop you? What's the moment when you realized you weren't just playing runs anymore, you were following the story on purpose? And when did you fall in love with Hades 2? I'm actually curious about that. Because if Hades 2 proves anything, it's this. A roguelike can be replayable without being hollow. A story can be deep without demanding that you stop playing to hear it. That balance is rare, and Hades 2 earns it. I'll see you guys later. Peace.
Take shelter.